everyone.
It's toasty in here.
It's really hot. I know. I do actually need my notes to read from, and I want to use them as a fan.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone, for session. So, I know we've just done a quick introduction, but I'm Louise. I'm a managing director of a brand experience agency called Scene Presents. And with me, I have the incredible Cali, who is head of UK events at Netflix. We're here today to talk about how brand experiences have kind of transformed over the last few years. The session's called From Gender to Neutral, but we're kind of talking widely about that, about how we can make brand experiences more inclusive, how brands are doing that really well. But I think it would probably be remiss of me, seeing as though we're sat on the female leader stage and I'm with an amazing female leader, if we didn't kind of touch on some of Cali's experiences. So Cali, obviously you've been in brand experiences for a long time. You even started in sports and some other quite kind of male dominated industries, let's say. So what have your experiences been and how have they kind of shaped how you've created brand experiences in your career?
I think it's been in multiple phases. You know, if I'm being completely honest, I think I started from a place of naivety and privilege, you know, going to an all-girls school here. I know I sound American, but here. And having parents who told me I could do anything when I was a kid and believing that. But quite quickly, I think, leaving school and going to university, where in my course I was one of, I think, 4 women in my particular course that I did. And then entering a workplace where I was working for traditional film studios. I also worked in quite a lot of sports and automotive in particular, which at the time, 20 years ago, was very much still a man's game. And I think during that time, I learned to code switch a bit to fit into those environments. You know, the loudest opinion in the room would win often, which as an introvert was not my forte, and took some effort to kind of come into my own there. But I think now, you know, being aware of all of that and the position I'm in now, really try and making space for all of the voices, all of the backgrounds, all of the genders in the room, because that's where the fun and the innovation comes from.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because obviously events and brand experiences, generally if you look around the room and look at all you guys, you would think that it's like female led, it's quite female dominant. And it is on the ground, but I suppose usually C-suite are male, and I've got a stat that only 28% of C-suite roles in marketing and events are led by women, which, you know, we're getting there, but isn't that great? But I think what really struck me of why that is that 33% of women will have a very different conversation of men when they go into a room that they think that they're less able for a role. Only 33% of them think they are able for a role versus something ridiculous like 80% of men. So I think with creating brand experiences and being females within that area, what we're trying to do is create acknowledgement of that and creating spaces where we can champion women and make them feel accepted and make them feel really confident. And I suppose that journey that we've both been on through events and brand experiences and agencies and companies that are a bit more male oriented have kind of set us up for that. So I suppose going on to question 2, so since you started in the industry, how have you seen brand experiences change when it comes to inclusivity, especially around the gender piece?
Like exponentially, which I think is fantastic. I mean, personally, I've always been obsessed with like the guest experience, how you move through spaces, those sorts of things. I think if I could do a crazy dream job, which sounds weird, I would like redesign airports, because I'm fascinated with like how and where people move and what do you get to do to kill the downtime and all that. All those sorts of things are like what get me really excited. So guest experience has always been in the forefront of my mind, which, you know, inherently touches on inclusion. But I don't believe you can really value inclusion until you consider it a core value of everything that you do, which I think a lot of brands are putting towards the forefront. I think, you know, I was reflecting on this as we came up here, but early on in my career, I was a PA, very briefly involved in the Dove campaign for Real Beauty, which was in 2004, I think. Someone can fact check me out in the room, I'm sure. But that's 20 years ago, and that felt, at the time, groundbreaking to talk about, like, non-traditional, you know, beauty standards in that regards. Now you see it in a lot of iterations, which is wonderful, but, like, looking at that spectrum of how far we've come, I think is really great.
Yeah. And From my perspective, I suppose, because I've been in events now for like 21 years, and back in the day, you would think, oh, we're doing an event for women, so let's do a flower photo backdrop. Definitely get rosé. They love that. Like, we'll put nice hand soap in the bathrooms. Nailed it. Like, whatever it is. And I think, hopefully, no one gets those kind of briefs anymore. And I think what's really interesting is that actually women buy 50% of the products that are actually targeted towards men. So cars, we've talked about, sports equipment, technology. It's actually the women that are buying them, 50% of it. So in your head, you'd think it'd be skewed the other way. And I think when we look at brand experiences and we design brand experiences, what actually you should be doing is trying to put the human at the centre of it, not the gender at the centre of it. And I think it's not really about those stereotypical kind of needs, and even we're obsessed with stereotypes, even though we're frantically trying to move away from them. And I think it's about thinking about what's culturally relevant to them, what's emotionally relevant to them. I think it's also thinking about macro trends. So there's always things that are always on, right, when we're talking about brand experiences, no matter the gender. So you might care about the environment. That's generally what we would consider a macro trend. Is never going to go away. But then you need to dial into the micro trends underneath that. So if you're talking towards specific age groups, specific kind of demographics, what are the micro trends that they're really interested in? So a massive one at the moment is nostalgia. Everyone's tapping into that at the moment. So that for me is like, you need to look more holistically versus stereotypically nuanced, I suppose. Okay, so moving on. So we know what we need to be doing, and I guess we know what we shouldn't be doing. But have you seen anything from brands recently that you're like, yeah, nailed it, love what they're doing there?
Yeah, I get jealous of other people's work a lot, and it fires me up. But I think, anything that's sort of effortless and clear in its message and has maintains sort of a strong sense of like escapism and play is really fun. A personal one that pops up to top of mind is I was and am a big Formula One fan, and I was a big Formula One fan growing up. And I always knew the stat that 40% of fans were women. But like I would look at the sport and I would look at it and I'd be like, I'm not seeing it though, And so it felt like it was never truly my playground. So this F1 Academy Charlotte Tilbury thing that's going on right now, I just think is so great. And their brands organically align so closely too that it just felt like, oh, how had we not done this before? And I think that's when those come along, that's when I really get inspired by things.
Yeah, and I think the other brands that are doing it really well are brands that are consistent. So Nike have always tried to champion, different demographics, and obviously trying to champion genders into spaces that might not be traditionally seen there. So they've got this amazing campaign on for getting young black women into basketball, which is really hard. Like, courts can feel really scary for younger women. But they've been doing it now for 7 years. And I think sometimes what happens with brands is they'll go, oh God, it's International Women's Day, like, let's, put some sort of like cocktail hour on and we'll do that. And then they like disappear again. And I think the key is to be like consistent. You have to show up, but you have to show up consistently and kind of make it part of your overall strategy. And then you used a word that I'm sure has been said 1,000 times today, is like that authentic word, is that you have to usually pick partners that are authentic to your brand positioning, your brand values. Otherwise, when you show up, you're just going to get caught out. Any demographic, millennial, Gen Z, they're savvy. They'll know that if you are randomly showing up in a female space and have never talked about that before, if you then don't do that again, then they're going to, not kind of want to live through that experience with you. So Netflix, obviously everyone knows that you're here from Netflix. Netflix caters to everything you could possibly wish to love.
There's a lot
There is a lot on
there.
Yes. It takes up all my time. If I'm not at work, I'm basically watching Netflix. So obviously on Netflix there are shows that are intrinsically skewed towards a gender. In your head, you'd go Bridgerton, women, right? Gentlemen, men. It's even the hints in the title.
I was going to say it's in the name.
Hints in the title. So how do you create inclusive brand experiences for shows like that when they are so stereotypically possibly skewed the other way?
Well, I think first and foremost, the thing that streaming has taught us is there's no one bucket. Like if you look at the last 5 things you watched, I dare anybody to say that they fall into a perfect female skewing
Literally,
bucket.
like, go from Squid Games to, like, Love is Blind.
Love is Blind is mine, and then normally like an awards title right immediately following that. So so I think, you know, we're very aware that those buckets don't exist and shouldn't exist. So we focus on the title, which is great, you know, because we can kind of step away from the brand on those ones and say, what is it that fans are going to love about this title? Taking The Gentleman as an example, you know, as we said, it's in the name, but really, I mean, loved by everyone. So what is it that they love? They love the fashion, they love the design, they love the world that Guy Ritchie built. So that's what we focus on at the event. You know, the fashion transcends all genders, you know. And you know, having people like David Beckham and Jason Statham walk the red carpet, I don't think anyone was upset by that. So, you know, we play into what we know that fans will love and respond to.
Yeah, and I think sometimes when we're trying to come up experiences with you, it's you have to almost write down the obvious, tear it up and throw it away, and then dig deeper. And obviously, the power of brand experience is that you can dig into the storytelling piece and this brand world building piece. And Netflix shows are so rich with that. But I think if you're working with brands that maybe don't have such rich storytelling, the thing is to try and dig into some of those values that brand stands for, some of the communities that it speaks to, and dip into those trends rather than thinking about maybe the obvious thing that springs to mind when you see it. Okay, so there's a stat out in the world that says 85% of women think that marketing needs to basically catch up with gender trends. They think that generally marketing is out of touch with what people of specific genders want to hear and want to see. So what do you think makes a good brand experience really relevant to anyone, no matter the gender?
Yeah, I feel that stat deeply, and personally, I feel like, just a total aside for a second, but I have 2 sons, and I took them shopping last week, and I was like, looking at all their clothes, and I was like, it's insane how early this starts. All the boys' clothes had predators on it, and all the girls' clothes had prey, and I was like, what is this telling us from this age, you know? And yes, there's some stuff inherently, like, there's no denying my boys love dinosaurs for whatever reason that is built into their bones. But there's also a piece that I just feel like we can do better.
Yeah.
You know, so I think to answer the other part of your question, to be relevant, you do have to be authentic, but you also have to kind of be mindful about what you're putting out there, and that you're not being lazy, I think, in your messaging. You know, to your point, I think we've come so far, but I still think we'll someone else will be sitting here in 20 years' time being like, oh, these, you know, can you believe what they did 20 years ago?
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
So I'm a millennial. I don't know if there's any millennials in the room, but 30% of us have unfollowed brands on social media because we think that they're not inclusive and or authentic. And I think generally when we're thinking about the future of brand experiences and how do we make people want to come to brand experiences, because apparently generally we're struggling to get people to come along to brand experiences. We're struggling to get them out of their seats, out of their homes, and come along. How do we get them to come along? And the biggest stat out there is that we need to make brand experiences and brands feel more culturally relevant. You need to get brands to align with the things that people really value culturally. So how do you kind of show up in spaces that they really resonate with, that they don't feel like you've just kind of done tokenism? And there's this we did an event the other week, there's this mad stat that if you can present a brand that is more culturally relevant, so feels like they are speaking to things that people care about, you are 2.6 times more likely to make more profit. So if brand experiences and brands are just showing up and not really thinking about why they're showing up, who they're speaking to, putting dinosaurs on a t-shirt, not actually thinking about, do they actually like dinosaurs? Is that actually what they're interested in, like doing their research? Then they're more likely to be less successful. But if they do it the other way, then money talks, right? Because we all put on brand experiences and everyone goes, oh, isn't that pretty? But actually procurement and finance, we're like, yeah, but how much money is it going to make me? So if you can say that, if you can go, well, if you show up in the right way, you're 2.6 times more likely to make more money, then they'll let you put a brand experience on, is what I'm saying.
I'm going to use that, actually.
Yeah, write it down. Okay, so got a couple more questions. So we've been doing this a long time. Obviously, we've had to pivot and shift. But when you are thinking of designing brand experiences, what are kind of the top things that you try and keep in mind?
I think we've talked about them, but in summary, it's audience, it's authenticity, and if I want to keep like the A thing going, I would say achievable goals. But I think one of the things we haven't talked about is it's so important to bring fun to the forefront too. And I don't think you can bring fun to the forefront if people aren't accurately taken care of or represented in the space that they're in. So those two play hand in hand. But we've talked about this. Fun is so important. There's so many studies on learning and cognition and bonding that happens during play, child or adult. That it really is important to any experience. And I think fun also, there's a piece of newness there. So innovation, I think, is really important. And it's a very competitive space to be, innovative in. But I do really try and consider that for almost everything we do as well.
I think play is an interesting one. The other thing is participation. I think a lot of brands can be quite passive sometimes, and if we think about the session title, which is like the future of brand experiences, how do you make brand experiences successful, no matter of the gender? And for me, the big one is participation. You've kind of got to bring people along on the journey with you, and for me, that is before the experience, during the experience, and after the experience. I can literally see people doing that. Do we feel like we're in the Bahamas? I've got sweat dripping down the inside of my leg, just letting you know. So I think the participation piece is really interesting, but it's about how do they want to participate. So when we're doing projects for Netflix and we're doing red carpet things, people want to get in the brand world. They want to literally immerse themselves in the brand world and get in there. When you may be doing it for more B2B experiences, they want to be educated, but they want to be educated in a hands-on, tangible way versus receiving that quite passively. So I think the play piece and the participation piece is interesting, and it's not just us saying it, because 80% of consumers are saying that if they engage and participate with a brand, then they're more likely to return to that brand and do that again, versus kind of being spoken at in a bit more of a passive way. So last question, just to round off. So I think we know what we need to be doing now, but what do you think is the actual future of brand experiences? What do we need to be doing to be and remain relevant?
It's all a journey. To your point that you just made about, being mindful of every step of a guest experience through a brand is so important from start to finish. But I also think it's a journey for us who create the experiences to say, we have to be adaptable. We have to be humble in what we don't know. We have to continue to lean into what's important to audiences, to fans, to whomever. And, the wonderful thing, though, is I know the event industry at large can do that. I mean, it was only a couple of years ago that we were asking whether or not events would ever come back at all, and we all pivoted to virtual things and completely changed the industry. Businesses completely changed their models. I think we've obviously answered whether or not events are coming back by all being here and sitting in this room, or if anyone was at Glastonbury and part of the 200,000 people who were there, they are back. But, I think we have to remind ourselves that we can be massively adaptable, we can change, we just need to treat it as business critical, which this is.
Yeah. For me, I think the future of brand experience is putting the human back in things. Like, there's 1,000 sessions at this festival and every other festival about AI, and literally I don't want to talk about it because I know it blows my mind. But what I think as brand experiences, for me, the future is putting the human back in things. Like, you cannot replicate the way a live experience makes you feel. That emotion that you get when you arrive at Glastonbury and you see the Coldplay, experience that they did, or you go to, I don't know, a Netflix red carpet and you're literally in the middle of Bridgerton in a hot air balloon. I don't think anything else replicates that feeling. So for me, it's not about putting gender or stereotypes at the center of an experience. It's about putting the human at the center of the experience and really understanding what do humans want culturally, emotionally, and putting that into play into real physical experiences. So hopefully we can continue to do that together. I'm going to let you all go because it is dripping in here. So have an amazing rest of your day, and thanks for having us.
Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate it.